There is a strange discomfort that arises when you meet someone for the second time and suddenly realize something unsettling. You remember their face, their voice, the moment you met, but their name is gone, completely absent, and in that instant, a quiet shame appears. You tell yourself it's just a bad memory. You laugh it off. You say, "I'm terrible with names." But psychology suggests something far more revealing is happening beneath the surface. Carl Jung believed that nothing meaningful in the psyche is truly accidental. If something disappears from awareness, it does so for a reason. Forgetting a name is not the same as forgetting a random fact. A name represents identity. It anchors a person in your inner world. When a name fails to stick, it often signals that the mind did not register the person as psychologically significant at the moment of contact. Not emotionally, not symbolically, not internally. This does not mean the person was unimportant in reality. It means they were not integrated into your inner narrative. Jung would say that attention follows meaning, and memory follows attention. When the psyche is not emotionally engaged, it does not invest energy, and without psychic energy, memory does not consolidate. But here is where it becomes uncomfortable. Many people who forget names easily are not careless. They are inwardly over-focused. Their attention is turned toward their own inner dialogue, their own thoughts, their own symbolic world. They are listening more to themselves than to the external moment. As a result, the outer world passes through them without fully imprinting. In Jungian terms, this is often linked to introversion of consciousness, not shyness, but psychic orientation. The mind prioritizes inner meaning over external detail. Faces are remembered because they carry emotional tone. Names are lost because they are abstract symbols, and symbols only stick when they are emotionally charged. There is also another layer, a deeper one. Sometimes forgetting a name is a subtle form of psychological distance. The unconscious decides, without asking permission, that full recognition is not necessary. This can happen when a person triggers no resonance, no tension, no archetypal response. The psyche conserves energy by letting the symbol fade. And yet the opposite can also be true. Some names are forgotten precisely because they provoke discomfort. Anxiety disrupts memory encoding. If a social interaction activates self-consciousness, insecurity, or performance pressure, the brain shifts into self-monitoring mode. In that state, the mind records very little about the other person. It is too busy watching itself. So when you forget a name, it may not be a failure of memory. It may be a reflection of where your awareness was, or where it refused to go. This matters because Jung insisted that what we consistently fail to notice reveals as much about us as what we remember effortlessly. Memory is selective, and selection is never neutral. As you listen to this, I want you to reflect honestly, not defensively, not with excuses, just awareness. Do you forget names because people blur together? Because your mind is always elsewhere? Or because your psyche only retains what feels meaningful to its internal world? If this question is touching something true in you, pause for a moment and comment the phrase, "Awareness comes before memory." We will go deeper into how identity, archetypes, and unconscious filtering determine what your mind allows itself to remember and what it quietly lets disappear. To understand why names vanish so easily for certain people, we need to move beyond memory and enter the territory Jung cared about most: identity. A name is not just a label. Psychologically, it is a symbol. It represents the moment when a human being becomes distinct in your inner world. When that symbol fails to take root, it means the psyche did not complete the act of recognition. Jung taught that the unconscious is constantly filtering reality. You do not experience the world directly. You experience what your psyche decides is relevant. This is why two people can walk through the same room and leave with completely different impressions. One remembers faces, another remembers energy, another remembers ideas. Memory always follows psychic priority. People who frequently forget names often live in a symbolic mode rather than a literal one. They register impressions, moods, archetypal patterns, but not surface identifiers. They sense whether someone feels familiar or foreign, safe or threatening, significant or irrelevant, long before a name ever arrives. And once the psyche makes that judgment, the name becomes secondary. This is especially true for individuals who are intuitive, reflective, or psychologically inward. Their minds are trained to read meaning, not data. Names feel artificial to them, external tags that do not carry essence unless something deeper connects first. Without emotional resonance, the symbol has no weight and therefore no memory, but there is a shadow side to this. Jung warned that what we do not consciously integrate becomes unconscious behavior. When you repeatedly forget names, it may signal a subtle withdrawal from the external world, a quiet decision, often unconscious, to remain protected inside the self. Remembering a name requires presence. Presence requires vulnerability, and vulnerability demands energy. For some, forgetting names is a defense, a way of avoiding full engagement. If you do not fully register the other, you cannot be fully affected by them. The psyche maintains distance by letting identifiers dissolve. There is also the matter of authority and hierarchy within the mind. Jung observed that the psyche organizes people according to inner value systems, not social ones. Names of figures who represent authority, challenge, or symbolic importance are remembered effortlessly. Names of those who feel interchangeable are not. This is not cruelty, it is psychological economy, and yet this pattern reveals something crucial. When the psyche forgets names easily, it is often signaling that it is not grounded enough in the present moment. It is living either in the inner future or the inner past. Jung would say the ego is not fully embodied in the now. This is why learning to remember names is not merely a social skill, it is a psychological practice. It trains the mind to be here, to witness, to assign meaning consciously instead of leaving everything to unconscious filtering. So ask yourself something deeper than, why am I bad with names? Ask instead, where is my attention when I meet another human being? If this resonates with you, take a moment and comment the phrase, presence creates recognition. At this point, it becomes clear that forgetting names is not about intelligence, memory capacity, or social skill. It is about how the unconscious assigns value. Carl Jung believed that the psyche does not treat all information equally. It organizes reality according to archetypal relevance. What fits into an internal pattern is remembered. What does not, fades. When you meet someone, the unconscious immediately asks a silent question. Who is this in relation to my inner world? Not their job, not their status, but their symbolic position. Are they a guide, a threat, a mirror, a stranger with no role? Until that role is unconsciously defined, the name has nowhere to attach. This is why certain names stick instantly. They belong to people who activate an archetype within you. Authority figures awaken the father archetype. Magnetic personalities activate the anima or animus. Challenging individuals provoke the shadow. When an archetype is activated, psychic energy surges, and memory becomes effortless. The name anchors itself naturally because it is now tied to meaning. But when no archetype is activated, the psyche remains neutral. Neutrality produces weak memory traces. The name floats briefly, then dissolves. This is not laziness. It is how the mind conserves energy. There is also a deeper and more uncomfortable layer. Sometimes forgetting names reveals a fear of individuation, the process Jung described as becoming fully oneself. Individuation requires seeing others as distinct individuals, not as background figures. When the psyche resists this, it blurs identities. Names disappear because differentiation feels threatening. In this sense, forgetting names can signal an unconscious resistance to relationship depth, not because the person lacks empathy, but because intimacy demands psychological risk. To remember someone's name is to acknowledge their presence in your inner world. And once acknowledged, they can no longer be ignored. Jung warned that what remains unconscious does not disappear. It governs behavior from the shadows. A person who forgets names may believe they are detached, but their psyche is making constant judgments beneath awareness. Distance is being created silently. This is why working on memory alone never solves the issue. The real work is symbolic. It is learning to assign conscious meaning instead of letting the unconscious decide automatically. When you intentionally connect a name to an image, a feeling, or a symbolic role, you are not using a trick. You are cooperating with the psyche's natural language. And here is the turning point. The moment you stop asking, "How do I remember names?" and start asking, "What role does this person play in my inner landscape?" memory begins to change, because memory follows meaning, always. If this insight is landing for you, quietly acknowledge it by commenting the phrase, "Meaning anchors memory." At the deepest level, forgetting names is not about other people at all. It is about the relationship you maintain with your own self. Jung believed that the psyche is always oriented toward wholeness. Everything it remembers or forgets serves that hidden aim. When names fade easily, it often reflects a consciousness that has not fully anchored itself in the outer world. The self seeks balance between inner and outer reality. When attention is overly withdrawn inward, the world becomes vague. Faces blur into impressions. Individuals lose definition. Names, which require conscious acknowledgement, dissolve first. Not because the mind is weak, but because it is elsewhere. Jung warned that modern individuals often mistake introspection for depth. But true psychological maturity requires presence. It requires the ego to stand firmly in reality, not drift endlessly through thought, imagination, or inner narratives. Remembering a name is a small act, but symbolically it is an act of grounding. When you remember a name, you say to the psyche, "This person exists. This encounter matters. I am here," and the unconscious responds by reorganizing attention. Memory improves not through force, but through alignment. There is also humility involved. Forgetting names can sometimes reveal an unconscious sense of separation, a quiet belief that the inner world is more important than the outer one. Jung would not condemn this, but he would challenge it. Individuation does not mean withdrawal from humanity. It means meeting others as distinct beings while remaining whole within yourself. This is why transformation begins with awareness, not technique. The moment you notice when and why a name slips away, you interrupt the unconscious pattern. You bring light where automation once ruled, and where consciousness enters, choice becomes possible. From that moment on, remembering names stops being a social obligation and becomes a psychological practice, a discipline of presence, a way of saying yes to the moment instead of retreating into the mind. So the next time you meet someone and feel the name slipping, do not rush past it. Pause, look, anchor yourself. Let the encounter register not just intellectually, but symbolically. That single act shifts the entire pattern. And if this reflection helped you see yourself more clearly, take a second to comment the phrase, "Presence restores identity." Because in the end, what you learn to recognize in others is inseparable from what you are willing to recognize in yourself.